Hello, myself Dr. Ritu Shukla. Today my topic of presentation is social and economic impacts of major disasters. I am assistant professor in Maharaja Bijliwasi Government Degree College, Ashiana, Lucknow. As we know, next, as we know, disasters. What are disasters? Disasters. How can we define disaster? Almost all the natural processes have potential to become a hazard if property, livestock, economy of human beings are affected, then the same hazard becomes a disaster next. Now, what is a disaster? Disaster means a catastrophe, mishap, calamity, or grave occurrence affecting any area from natural or man-made causes or by accident or negligence which results in substantial loss of life or human suffering or damage to and destruction to property or damage to or degradation of environment, and if of such a nature and magnitude as to beyond the capacity of the community of the affected areas. Next. Now, what is hazard? Hazard, which is defined from a French word hazard, it means the idea of risk, danger, source of harm or peril. It is the notion of a potential source of harm or peril. Hazard, we can say jokhim, and disaster is apada. Now, next types of disaster. What are the major types of disasters? When we see that there are some natural disasters like geological or geophysical, for example, earthquakes, volcanism, tsunami, mass movement, landslide. If we talk about climatological disaster, it is extreme heat, extreme cold, precipitation. If we see hydrological, it is mass movement, landslide, flood, flash flood, urban flooding, drought, and tsunami. Meteorological disaster, it is tornado, cyclone, hurricanes, cloudburst, storm surge, lightning, etc. And when the disaster is caused by some viruses effects, bacterial, prion or locust, it is termed as biological. And when we talk about extraterrestrial, it is bolide impact, asteroid impact, meteorite fall, etc. Now, the other classification of disaster is man-made. Man-made disasters are war, battle, hostile enemy actions, industrial accidents, accidents of vehicles, trains, aircrafts and ships, fire and forest fire, nuclear explosion, accidents, radioactive leakages, ecological disasters like deforestation, soil erosion, air, water pollution, etc., sleeping cell and suicide bombers, and the most recent, which we all have been affected, is COVID-19. Next. Although disasters are natural and classified as natural and man-made, but I think, in my opinion, all the disasters are man-made. Now, what are the impact of disasters? Disasters really affect our lives and property. They affect the primary sources of land, like land, water, biomass, etc., and they cause damage to agriculture, fisheries, population, gender, age, specific property and infrastructure, and they negatively impact all the development programs including poverty alleviation, economy, education, services and infrastructure, health and sanitation, employment, etc. Next, as we have discussed, that impacts are of many kinds. Disasters impact us in many ways like physical, environmental, social and economic. Next. Now, what are the social impacts, which is my main topic? What are the social impact of disaster? It is change in individual's role. When disaster happens, the society greatly affected and it changes the role of each and every individual. Disruption of social fabric, people lives in isolation, changes in marital status, sexual abuse and domestic violence, the main impact of social disaster, and orphanages, orphans, single parent children, family and social disorganization happens, it leads to migration of people, it leads to lifestyle changes, and it leads to breakdown of traditional social status. Next. As we have discussed, what are the social impacts? In adding to it, I can say that it affects the family very much and it changes the family dynamics. It physically destroys important social institutions within the community. It obstructs the community's ability to serve the public or conduct daily activities. The community could become overly dependent on humanitarian aid and could alter the production pattern of the community. Now, what are the economic impacts of disasters? Disasters leads to unemployment, it leads to loss of life, it leads to loss of livelihood, it leads to loss of property, it leads to household, loss of household articles, it leads to loss of crops, and it leads to loss of public infrastructure. So, we can see that it affects both in a social and economic way. Now, what we can do, because we uh, free ourselves with the disasters. Disasters are natural processes which occur really due to the more intervention of human beings. So we can't evade disasters, but we can follow some preventive measures like mitigation. What is mitigation? Mitigation is the strategy. Next, mitigation is the strategy and plan to minimizing negative impact of hazard and sustained action taken to reduce long-term vulnerability of human life or property. Next, now we should also follow some disaster preparedness plan, because disasters are inevitable. But when we follow a plan, we can be able to lessen its disastrous impact. Like, assess the risk. What are the features of the disaster preparedness plan? It assesses the risks. Next, we can develop a plan, we can provide training to individuals so that they can cope up with the disastrous events and situations, understand emergency alerts. Next, communicate and create a team. So now, as we have discussed that disasters really impact our life in many ways, like socially impact, we can see economic impacts, we can see political impacts. But I conclude my my paper presentation with a saying of Atharvaveda, of Rig Veda, which says that Mata Bhumi Putro Aham Prithivya. When we follow such a relationship with the nature, we will less be affected with the disasters, because we will not exploit our nature in a more devastating way, but we can only use the natural resources just for our needs. So I must conclude by saying that we must now should avoid the exploitation of nature. Thank you so much.